Everything has to be done in moderation, and within the like community or the population that comes here, that you have the gamut of people that there's always going to be somebody that pushes the boundaries. There's always going to be somebody that is maybe doing a little bit too much, but trying to find that common sense approach, like the reef sharks or the hammerheads and stuff like that. It is a huge local incentive for economics, but it's also a huge kind of like social thing where it can help change that perception of sharks and make help reiterate like why that sharks don't need to be harvested, that they're not a danger to the beaches. The fact that you can have these animals right out here and you never have a negative interaction in Bimini, like you can always point and be like, hey, like these animals are naturally in this area, and they're not here to hunt people. You can have people snorkeling, doing whatever, but there still needs to be a safety. Like you can't just dump people that are maybe unfamiliar with their equipment in with a bunch of reef sharks and make there has to be like safety mechanisms in place, and a lot of that just comes down to common sense ways of doing it and things. It's like anytime you go out, I view the shark diving the same way that you would view any scuba diving situation. Like you have to have some measures where you're looking at things like tides, looking at things like depths, looking at things like boat traffic in the area. You always have these variables you have to take into account, and you should take that into account with most of the shark areas as well. We know from most of our research, kind of historically, that like for the hammerheads, for example, it hasn't changed their like natural migration. So one of the challenges that you have being so close to the U.S. is that a lot of the hammerheads will actually leave, and we're only about 25 miles away from like U.S. federal waters, and then so they're managed differently in U.S. federal waters, and then if they go to Florida state waters, they're managed differently. Some of them go throughout the southeast U.S. all the way up to like Georgia, South Carolina, Virginia. So you have all these different like management things, and so we know that the sharks aren't just staying at that dive site. They do have kind of a natural tendency to still have that ingrained migration or long range movement, but that opens them up to kind of sometimes being vulnerable to fisheries. So it's kind of like, on one hand, I think you have to do it sustainably here. On the other hand, I'm looking at it like, well, if they do stay in Bimini, at least maybe they're not being fished where they could be fished if they went somewhere else throughout the Caribbean or even over to U.S. waters or something. So it's a really complex thing because they do have it very good in the Bahamas being protected, but we don't want to be changing their natural behavior, their natural role in the ecosystem. So moderation, I guess, is the best way to look at it.